The call came just after 6:30 a.m., cutting through the early stillness of a crisp Wyoming morning. Dr. Grace Whitaker was standing on the porch of Frontier Hearts Wildlife Rescue, watching her breath fog in the cold air when her satellite phone buzzed. She answered on the second ring. "Grace, it's Clay Foster," came the voice on the line. Clay was a wildlife photographer who roamed the most remote corners of the state. "You need to get up to Raven Ridge. There's a Mustang down, big stallion. Hasn't moved in over 12 hours. Buzzards are already circling." Grace's stomach dropped. A wild stallion not moving in that kind of cold? Something was very wrong. "Send the GPS coordinates," she said, already moving toward the barn. "We're on our way." She called in her field team. Travis King, her rugged, no-nonsense vet tech with a scar across one eyebrow and hands like leather, and Rachel Kim, their newest recruit, quiet, observant, and surprisingly attuned to animal behavior. By 7 a.m., the three of them were in the rescue truck, heading north through winding trails and frozen streams, the sky painted in steel gray and faint lavender. Grace sat up front, flipping through a topographic map. Rachel sat in the back, nervously checking vitals on the mobile unit's monitoring gear. "Raven Ridge?" Travis asked, his voice low. "That place eats horses alive. Steep drops, loose rock, mountain lions." "Yeah," Grace replied, her voice clipped. "And wild Mustangs don't just lie down unless they're dying. But if this one's been down all night and he's still breathing, he's choosing to stay." Rachel leaned forward. "But why? What would keep a stallion grounded like that?" Grace didn't answer. She had a feeling they were about to find out. An hour later, they reached the rim of Raven Ridge. The truck couldn't go further, so they hiked the last half-mile on foot, wind whipping through the pines as the terrain grew more dangerous with every step. Grace led the way, stepping carefully on the uneven ground until they reached a rock outcropping that overlooked the clearing below. And then they saw him. He was magnificent, even in distress. A massive black Mustang stallion, his coat dark as coal and shimmering faintly in the morning light. He was lying in an awkward curve, one leg pinned beneath him, but his head was up, eyes sharp and fixed on them. His chest rose and fell with visible effort. Blood darkened the fur around his left shoulder, and there was a torn patch of hide near his flank. "Jesus," Travis muttered. "He's a damn warrior." But Grace wasn't looking at the injuries. She was looking at how he was curled. Not collapsed, not broken, but wrapped around something, protectively, deliberately. "He's guarding something," Rachel said, breath catching. "More like shielding," Grace murmured. They set up scopes and crouched behind a fallen tree about 30 yards out. The stallion's ears twitched at the sound, but he didn't move. His eyes followed their every shift. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then, just as Rachel was adjusting her lens, she gasped. There, under his belly, something pink. Grace raised her binoculars. A flicker of soft color peeking from under the stallion's broad chest. She adjusted focus. Her breath caught. It's a blanket." Travis leaned in. "You sure?" "Pink, fabric, and wait, movement." Grace lowered the binoculars and turned to Rachel. "Call 911. Get search and rescue, CPS, a chopper, whatever they've got. We've got a stallion down and a human infant." Rachel didn't hesitate. Her fingers moved fast on the satellite phone keypad. Grace crept forward 5 more feet, her hands out, voice low and steady. "Easy, big guy. We're here to help." The stallion snorted, deep and guttural, but didn't rise. He shifted his weight slightly, wincing, and for just a second Grace saw it. A tiny hand. The baby, wrapped in a dirty pink blanket, nestled into the warmth of the stallion's body like it was the most natural place in the world. "She's alive," Grace whispered. "He's kept her warm all night." Travis blinked hard. "That's not instinct, that's something else." Grace nodded slowly. "That horse is making a choice." The stallion moved again, lowering his massive head to nuzzle the infant gently. His mouth made soft huffing sounds. Reassurance. Grace had worked with wild Mustangs for 20 years. She had never seen anything like it. "Name him," Rachel said suddenly, before someone else does. Grace glanced at the stallion. "Thunder." As if he heard it, Thunder let out a low, rumbling sound that echoed off the canyon walls. He shifted again, this time allowing just enough space between his legs and chest for the baby to be seen more clearly. The pink blanket was dirty, but intact. The baby stirred again. "She's probably no more than 6 months old," Grace said. Still breathing, still conscious. The stallion made a deep grunt and looked up at Grace, eyes wide, alert, and so filled with something raw and unspoken that it made her chest ache. "Okay," she whispered. "You win. We'll do this your way." Rachel returned. "Rescue teams are en route. Chopper ETA is 25 minutes. Travis shook his head. "He's not going to like the helicopter." "I don't care," Grace said. "We're not leaving her out here, not now, not after he kept her alive." They spent the next few minutes preparing supplies, IV fluids, blankets, sedation darts as a last resort. But Thunder never let them come too close. He remained watchful, grounded, and defiant. His body might have been breaking, but his will wasn't. Then, without warning, Thunder shifted again, lifting his chest with effort. His muscles quivered from the strain, but the movement allowed Grace to take one slow, careful step closer. She dropped to her knees just 10 feet away. The wind blew gently across the ridge. A raven cawed in the distance. The baby made a faint cooing noise, and Thunder, bleeding, battered, and exhausted, let out a sigh, as if saying, "I trust you, but don't make me regret it." Grace looked up at the stallion and whispered, "We're going to help her." "I swear it." And Thunder, guardian of the canyon, didn't move. He simply watched, waiting to see if the humans were worthy of the trust he had already shown. And far above, in the cold Wyoming sky, a distant hum signaled that help was finally on its way. The hum of rotors grew louder, slicing through the silence of the canyon like a blade. Thunder's ears pinned back the moment the helicopter appeared over the ridge, its silhouette cutting across the pale blue morning sky. He didn't rise. He couldn't. But the change in his body was immediate. Every muscle coiled like a loaded spring. His nostrils flared. His eyes snapped to the sky, then to the tiny bundle nestled against his chest. He wasn't going to run. He was going to fight. Grace Whitaker crouched low on the rocks nearby, her hands raised, her voice soft and measured. "It's okay, Thunder. We've got you. We're not here to take her away, not unless you say it's time." The stallion didn't budge. Blood seeped slowly from the wound on his shoulder, staining the earth beneath him. His breathing was shallow now, rasping, but his gaze stayed sharp. He watched every movement Rachel made as she spread out blankets and prepared a warmer for the baby. Travis stood back with a tranq rifle slung across his shoulder, tension clear in his jaw. "He's barely holding on," Travis muttered. "He's gonna collapse." Grace shook her head. "Not until she's safe. That's all he cares about." The helicopter hovered for a moment before settling in a clearing 200 feet away. Dust kicked up in gusts around the team, and Thunder flinched but stayed firm, shifting slightly to shield the baby from the downwash. He grunted in pain as his leg buckled but refused to lie flat. He was in agony. But he didn't brake. Out of the chopper stepped Dr. Mason Rivers, a trauma medic from Jackson Memorial, along with 2 EMTs and a field nurse. He spotted Grace immediately and jogged over with a skeptical look on his face. "You're serious about this?" he said, squinting toward the scene. "A wild stallion protecting an infant." "See for yourself," Grace said, handing him the binoculars. He looked, and he went pale. "That's Jesus. That's a baby. Alive, breathing, and being guarded like she's his own," Grace said. "We don't know how or why. We just know she wouldn't have survived the night without him." Dr. Rivers let out a slow exhale. "All right, then we get her. Carefully." "No sudden moves," Grace warned. "If he panics, he could crush her by accident or worse." The team moved in cautiously, step by step, circling to create a perimeter. Rachel kept a hand on the emergency warmer while whispering to the baby from a distance, her voice soft as wind through grass. Thunder watched them all, head swiveling with laser focus, but he didn't lash out. Not yet. Grace inched forward again. She was close enough now to see the tiny fingers curled around the edge of the pink blanket. The baby's face peeked through, pale, flushed, and confused, but alert. "You've done good, big guy," she murmured. "But she needs more help than you can give." As if he understood, Thunder shifted again. It was a small motion, just enough for Grace to take 2 steps closer. She dropped to her knees, letting the baby see her clearly. "I'm not going to hurt you, sweetheart," she whispered. "I just want to hold you for a minute." The baby let out a faint whimper, and Thunder's head snapped down inches from her. He let out a soft, rumbling nicker, deep and calming. The baby blinked once, then stilled. "He's soothing her," Rachel whispered behind Grace, "like a father would." Grace nodded. "We're not dealing with instinct anymore. This is something else." Finally, the stallion let out one long breath, lowered his head to the earth, and closed his eyes. Not in surrender, but in trust. Grace leaned in, heart pounding, and reached out. Her fingers brushed the baby's cheek, warm, alive. She slipped one hand under the baby's shoulders, the other beneath her legs, and gently lifted. The baby made a weak noise, then nestled against Grace's chest as if sensing safety. "I've got her," Grace called out. "She's responsive. She's warm." Thunder's ears twitched at the sound, but he didn't rise. His job, for now, was done. Dr. Rivers rushed in, taking the baby into his arms as Grace wrapped her in the heated blanket. The medic's expression turned grim. "She's dehydrated and pale, but vitals are good. She needs fluids and oxygen, fast." The medical team rushed the baby toward the chopper, but as they moved away, Thunder suddenly tried to follow. His front leg trembled violently, and his shoulder gave out. He collapsed to one knee, a strangled grunt escaping him. Grace ran back to his side. "You don't have to chase her. She's safe. You did that." Thunder's sides heaved, his eyes rolled, but he stopped trying to get up. Travis knelt beside him, whispering low, "You held on for her. Now, let us hold on for you." They got an IV line into Thunder's neck, administered antibiotics, and cleaned his wound as best they could in the field. Rachel stroked his muzzle gently, and the stallion didn't resist. His ears stayed tilted in the direction of the departing helicopter, eyes tracking its flight until it disappeared over the ridge. "He's still watching for her," Rachel said. "He's still on duty." The medical chopper disappeared into the clouds. The canyon fell quiet again. Just the wind, the breath of the stallion, and the hum of life returning. Grace stood beside Thunder, placing a hand on his side. "You kept her alive when the world gave up on her," she said softly. "Now it's our turn." The stallion didn't respond, but his breathing slowed just slightly. Not from weakness, but from peace. And high above, where the sun cut golden through the clouds, the story of a wild horse and a human child had only just begun. The media got wind of it by sundown. By the time Grace returned to Frontier Hearts that evening, her inbox was exploding with messages from journalists, government officials, and curious strangers. The story of the black Mustang who shielded a human baby through a freezing Wyoming night had made its way from local dispatch to national headlines, and Raven Ridge, once a forgotten scar in the state's wilderness, was suddenly the center of the country's attention. But Grace had no time for news cameras. She was more concerned with keeping Thunder alive. Her team had set up a makeshift veterinary camp right in the canyon. Portable shelters, med kits, IVs, feed, thermal blankets, everything they could haul in on short notice. Thunder was too injured to transport safely, and Grace refused to risk another move until his condition stabilized. Rachel had barely left his side. She monitored his vitals, changed his dressings, and whispered encouragements like they were prayers. Travis handled logistics, rerouting power, dragging in supplies on muleback, and doing his best to ignore the growing circle of media that had found a trailhead down the ridge. Thunder never resisted the care, but he never stopped scanning the horizon either, especially at night, when the wind stirred and coyotes cried from distant hills. His ears twitched toward the sky, toward the place where the helicopter had disappeared hours earlier. He was still looking for her. Grace stood by his shelter that evening, arms crossed tight across her chest. She didn't say a word as Thunder's eyes flicked toward her, then back to the stars. "She's okay," she whispered. "They took her to Jackson Children's. She's stable, eating, sleeping. You did it, big guy." Thunder blinked slowly. He didn't understand the words, but something in Grace's tone must have landed. His breathing slowed just a little. The next morning, a sheriff's SUV rolled down the dirt road into camp. Deputy Marisol Santos, a tough, sharp-eyed woman with dark curls tucked under her hat, stepped out holding a manila folder. Grace met her by the truck. "We've run the baby's fingerprints," Santos said without ceremony. "Nothing in the system. No recent missing persons matching her description. No Amber Alerts. It's like she just appeared." Grace frowned. "No one reported her missing?" Santos shook her head. "Not a soul, but we found something else. Tire tracks. About a quarter mile up the mining road, fresh, maybe 2-3 days old." Grace's jaw tightened. "So, someone left her out here?" "Looks like it, intentionally." Travis overheard and came walking up, dirt streaked on his jeans and sweat under his hat. "You're telling me someone drove a baby into this canyon and just left her?" Santos flipped open the file. "We're working a lead, a Denver teen named Jessica Martinez, 19. No priors, but she's been on the run. Possible connection to a local drug ring. We think she might be the mother." Grace felt her stomach sink. "She abandoned her baby?" Rachel asked, approaching from the tent. Her voice was quiet, edged with something sharp. "Doesn't look like a clean-cut case," Santos said. "The girl's boyfriend is a known dealer. Martinez had been missing for almost a week. There's a theory she was trying to get away. Maybe she thought someone would find the baby before the weather turned. She left an infant alone in bear country," Rachel said flatly. "That's not desperate. That's insane." "Maybe," Grace murmured, her voice more thoughtful than angry. "Or maybe she thought she was saving her." Later that evening, Grace sat by Thunder again, watching the last rays of light sink below the canyon rim. He lay quietly in the straw, breathing slow, nostrils twitching at every sound. "You didn't have to protect her," she said quietly. "But you did. You didn't just stand guard, You gave her warmth, covered her with your body. You made her feel safe." She paused, then whispered, "She's safe now. But she misses you. I think you miss her too." Thunder didn't respond, but he looked toward her again, then toward the sky. 2 days passed. Thunder's wound began healing, and the swelling in his shoulder subsided thanks to antibiotics and proper care. The field team rotated in shifts to watch him, but he remained cooperative, calm, except when helicopters passed overhead, even in the far distance. Then he would rise, ears high, body tense, as if hoping she'd come back. On the third morning, Santos returned, this time with a grim look. "We found her," the deputy said, handing Grace a report. Jessica Martinez had been arrested at a bus station near the New Mexico border, trying to flee the state. She was exhausted, incoherent, and carrying a fake ID. She confessed to leaving the baby, Santos said. Said her boyfriend threatened to kill them both. She didn't know who to trust. Thought maybe if she left the baby in the canyon, someone kind would find her before the boyfriend did. Grace stared at the photo clipped to the file. A girl, no older than some of her interns. Hollow cheeks, eyes full of panic and exhaustion. "She left her child in the wild," Travis muttered, pacing. "She could have gone to a hospital, a church, anywhere." "She was terrified," Grace said softly. "People do desperate things when they think no one's coming." Rachel looked away, her jaw tight. Back in the canyon, Thunder stood again for the first time in days, slowly stretching his healing legs beneath the shelter. He sniffed the air, stared toward the trail, and waited. Grace watched him, arms folded, mind racing. They had rescued the baby. They had found the mother, but nothing about this felt finished. Because some part of this stallion still believed his job wasn't done. And deep down, Grace knew he might be right. The crying wouldn't stop. It had been 4 days since the rescue, and baby Isabella, now named by the hospital staff, refused to sleep for more than an hour at a time. She cried through feedings, through warm baths, through lullabies sung by exhausted nurses. Nothing helped. Not formula, not skin-to-skin contact, not even medical sedation. Her tiny fists clenched at the air, her face twisted in silent screams, and her body trembled with a panic no one could explain. "She's medically stable," Dr. Mason Rivers said, rubbing his eyes after another long shift at Jackson Children's. "Vitals are good, lungs are clear, no signs of infection or the trauma, but emotionally, she's shutting down." Grace sat in the pediatric ward's waiting room, her coat still covered in hay from the ridge. She hadn't slept much either, not with Thunder still under watch in Raven Ridge and Isabella unraveling in the city. "She's grieving," Grace said quietly. "That stallion, he didn't just keep her alive. He held her, he soothed her. She slept under his heartbeat." Dr. Rivers raised an eyebrow. "You're saying she bonded with a horse?" "I'm saying she felt safe with him, and now that bond's been ripped away." The doctor hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Well, here's the crazy part. One of the nurses tried something yesterday, played a recording of horse sounds on her phone. You know, nickerings, hoofbeats. And for the first time in 2 days, Isabella stopped crying." Grace blinked. "Seriously?" She calmed down like someone flipped a switch. A silence settled between them. "Bring her back," Grace said at last. "Just for a visit. Controlled environment, monitored. Let her see him again." Dr. Rivers exhaled. "You're asking me to authorize a field visit between a 6-month-old baby and a wild Mustang. He's not wild anymore, not with her. That horse could still hurt someone. You want me to sign off on a reunion like it's a school field trip?" "No," Grace replied. "I want you to sign off because you know what'll happen if we don't. "She's slipping, Doctor, fast, and that horse is still scanning the sky like he's waiting for his heart to come back." The legal and medical logistics were a nightmare. Child Protective Services balked. The hospital's Board of Ethics needed multiple hearings. Grace had to bring in wildlife experts, trauma specialists, even a pediatric psychologist. News of the proposal leaked, and national media spun the story into everything from miracle to madness. But behind the scenes, something extraordinary was happening. People wanted it to be true. Letters poured in, parents, veterans, teachers, survivors, people who understood what it meant to cling to something when the world fell apart. After 5 tense days, the impossible was approved. 1 supervised visit, 1 hour, under strict medical and veterinary oversight, in a fully controlled space built on site at Raven Ridge. The morning of the reunion, Grace stood in the clearing where it had all begun. The camp had been transformed into a temporary sanctuary, quiet, fenced, and surrounded by a circle of experts with clipboards, cameras, and medical kits. In the center stood Thunder, freshly brushed and calm, watching the wind with those endless dark eyes. Rachel waited near the gate, adjusting the shade canopy over the observation tent. "He's been pacing less," she said, almost like he knows she's coming. Grace didn't respond. She was watching the sky. And then, at last, the sound of rotors broke over the ridge. Thunder lifted his head, ears flicking forward. He let out a deep, rolling nicker, a sound unlike any Grace had heard from him before. It was low and melodic, almost hopeful. The helicopter touched down and a nurse stepped out with Isabella bundled tightly in a pink blanket. Her eyes were wide and glassy, her tiny body stiff with nerves. Dr. Rivers carried her carefully toward the enclosure. Thunder didn't charge. He didn't rear or snort. He simply waited, muscles vibrating like a tuned string. When they reached the edge of the space, Grace nodded to the handlers and gently opened the gate. Dr. Rivers stepped forward and lowered Isabella into a padded carrier set on the ground. For 1 terrifying second, nothing happened. Then the baby whimpered. Thunder froze, his ears tilted. She whimpered again, softer this time, and Thunder moved. Slowly, reverently, he stepped forward 1 pace at a time until he stood above her. He lowered his great head, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. And Isabella smiled. The sound she made, half giggle, half sigh, was the first genuine joy anyone had seen from her since the canyon. Her tiny fingers reached upward, brushing the stallion's muzzle, and Thunder let out a rumble so deep it seemed to shake the ground. Dr. Rivers stared, stunned. Her heart rate just stabilized, completely normal. "She remembers him," Rachel whispered. "She knows." For the next 40 minutes, Thunder stood guard beside Isabella, while she babbled, cooed, and even napped briefly beneath his towering frame. Every time she stirred, he'd make a soft sound, and she would settle. At the end of the hour, Grace stepped forward and gently scooped Isabella back into her arms. Thunder watched, but didn't protest. He followed with his eyes as they walked away, his body tense, but no longer frantic. As the team prepared to leave, Grace turned back one last time. "I don't know what this is," she said aloud, "but it's real, and we need to stop pretending it isn't." Thunder stood in the wind, mane rippling, his gaze fixed on the retreating child like a soldier watching his commander leave the field. But Grace knew this wasn't the end. Not for them, and not for whatever came next. It started with a question no one could answer. How do we separate them? In the days after the supervised reunion, that question hovered over every meeting room, every agency call, every conversation between Grace, the doctors, the wildlife officials, and the legal teams. Because it was clear to everyone, separating Thunder and Isabella again wasn't just difficult, it was cruel. After the visit, Isabella's health had improved so dramatically that her pediatrician used the word miraculous. Her appetite returned. She began sleeping through the night. Her blood oxygen stabilized. But more than that, her eyes lit up again. Her laughter came back. Dr. Rivers, once skeptical, now championed the case. "We're witnessing something unprecedented," he told the hospital board. "This is not just emotional imprinting, it's neurological, physiological. That stallion didn't just protect her, he wired into her world." And so, the unthinkable became the undeniable. They needed to build a life where Thunder and Isabella could coexist. Grace took the lead. She reached out to the Bureau of Land Management and pitched a bold plan. Designate a portion of Raven Ridge as a protected sanctuary, not just for Thunder, but for the bond he'd forged with a human child. The proposal wasn't without controversy. Wildlife sanctuaries weren't built for this. No policy existed for an interspecies guardian. But when the news broke nationally, donations flooded in. Foundations, rescue groups, animal behaviorists, even private citizens contributed. People wanted to believe in this bond. They wanted to help protect it. Within weeks, construction began on a modest cabin nestled near the edge of the preserve, just 100 yards from Thunder's open-range enclosure. Solar-powered, eco-friendly, simple but sturdy. It was built not just for Isabella, but for her mother too. Jessica Martinez had undergone intense rehabilitation, both legally and emotionally. After weeks in protective custody, therapy, and parenting classes, she stood before a family court judge and made a tearful plea. "I know I failed her," she said, "but if I can make it right, I want to try. I want to be a mother worthy of the second chance Thunder gave us." The judge granted supervised custody with monthly evaluations. And with that, Jessica and Isabella moved into the cabin overlooking Raven Ridge, the place where their story began. The first night, Thunder stood just outside the fence line, watching as lights flickered on inside. Isabella squealed in delight, pressing her tiny palms against the window. Thunder let out a low, familiar nicker, and the baby responded with laughter. From that day forward, he never wandered far. He had the freedom to roam the preserve, acres of wild hills and pine-shaded trails, but he almost never left the ridge above the cabin. In the early mornings, Jessica would find him standing by the fence, waiting. And every evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, Isabella would toddle out onto the porch and call, "Thunda," and he would come. Always. Grace visited often, tracking Thunder's health and Isabella's progress. She kept detailed logs, growth patterns, behavioral observations, subtle changes in the stallion's demeanor. But no data point ever captured what she saw with her own eyes. Love, raw, unfiltered, and beautifully inexplicable. By her second birthday, Isabella was speaking in short phrases. She named every stuffed animal in her room after something wild. Moose, eagle, and of course, horsey. But only Thunder got a special name. Best, that's what she called him. My best. He returned the sentiment in his own way, nuzzling her gently when she approached, lowering his massive head so she could press her cheek against his. He never reacted that way with anyone else. Not with Jessica. Not with Grace. Only with her. On weekends, families came from all over to visit the preserve. They didn't come to see a spectacle. They came to witness a story. A baby and a horse, against all odds, had found one another. And in doing so, they'd reminded everyone of something deeply human. That family is not always what we're born into. Sometimes it's what we choose. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the leaves turned gold across the valley, Grace stood by the fence watching Thunder graze beside Isabella in the grass. The little girl giggled as she chased a butterfly, while Thunder followed a few paces behind, calm, steady, always near. Jessica stepped beside Grace, arms crossed loosely. "You think he knows?" she asked softly. Grace didn't take her eyes off the scene. "Knows what?" "That he saved her. That we're all here because of him." Grace nodded slowly. "I think he knows exactly who he is to her. And I think he's proud of it." The sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across Raven Ridge. Isabella ran back toward the cabin, arms outstretched, and Thunder followed, his dark coat glowing in the last light of day. In that moment they looked like a pair who had always belonged together. Because they had. Not by blood, not by law, but by love, the kind that defies explanation, the kind that changes everything,